Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janabalaba Girivardhari Gopi Janabalaba Girivardhari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Asatara Satashi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai Mathura Dhama Ki Jai Navadvip Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai Ganga Maya Jamuna Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharni Nivasesa Nivadi Paskatyade Satarane. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Panchakapachubhascha Kripasindhibhyebhata Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it's August 25th, 2022 from the Bhakti Center in New York, and reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 7, Lord Krishna shows the universal form within his mouth. We're going to be finishing up this chapter, reading texts 50 through 52.
Chapter 8, right?
Chapter 8, Canto 10, Chapter 8, text 50 through 52. That's correct, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. I want to find out I prepared for the wrong verse. Astvitiyukta sa Bhagavan Rajejona Mahayasha Nagne Nanda iti kyato Yasoda Sadara Bhavat Astu When Brahma agreed, yes, it is all right, iti yuktaha, thus being ordered by him, saha, he, Drona, Bhagavan, eternally the father of Krishna, Bhagavan's father is also Bhagavan, Vraje, in Vrajabhumi, Vrindavan, Dronaha, Drona, the most powerful Vasu, Mahayashaha, the very famous transcendentalist, Gnagne, appeared, Nandaha, as Nanda Maharaj, Iti, thus, Kyataha, is celebrated, Yashoda, as Mother Yashoda, Sa, she, Dada, the same Dada, Abhavat, appeared. It's interesting, this word Kyataha is celebrated yesterday. I met a doctor called Kyati, which is, she told us, Gujarati for famous. So Srila Prabhupada's translation, when Brahma said, yes, let it be so, the most fortunate Drona, who was equal to Bhagavan, appeared in Vrajapura, Vrindavan, as the most famous Nanda Maharaj, and his wife Dada appeared as Mother Yasoda. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Because whenever Krishna appears on this earth, he superficially needs a father and mother. Drona and Dada, his eternal father and mother, appeared on earth before Krishna as Nanda Maharaj and Yasoda. In contrast to Sutapa and Prishni, they did not undergo severe penances and austerities to become the father and mother of Krishna. This is the difference between Nityasiddha and Sadhanasiddha. So I've been asked to read the next two verses as well. So text 51, Tato Bhaktir Bhagavati Putri Bhute Janardane Dampachor Nitaram Ashi Gopa Gopi Shubharata. That Srila Prabhupada's translation. Thereafter, O Maharaj Parikshit, best of the Bharatas, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead became the son of Nanda Maharaj and Yasoda, they maintained continuous, unswerving devotional love and parental affection. And in their association, all the other inhabitants of Vrindavana, the Gopas and Gopis, developed the culture of Krishna Bhakti. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Although when the Supreme Personality of Godhead stole the butter, yogurt, and milk of the neighborhood Gopas and Gopis, this teasing superficially seemed troublesome. In fact, it was an exchange of affection in the ecstasy of devotional service. The more the Gopas and Gopis exchanged feelings with the Lord, the more their devotional service increased. Sometimes we may superficially see that a devotee is in difficulty because of being engaged in devotional service, but the fact is different. When a devotee suffers for Krishna, that suffering is transcendental enjoyment. Unless one becomes a devotee, this cannot be understood. When Krishna exhibited his childhood pastimes, not only did Nanda Maharaj and Yasoda increase their devotional affection, but those in their association also increased in devotional service. In other words, persons who follow the activities of Vrindavana will also develop devotional service in highest perfection. And text 52. Krishna Brahmana Adesham Satyam Kartum Vraje Vibhu Saharamo Vasams Chakre Tesham Priti Swalilaya. Thus, the Supreme Personality, Krishna, along with Balaram, lived in Vrajabhumi, Vrindavana, just to substantiate the benediction of Brahma. By exhibiting different pastimes in his childhood, he increased the transcendental pleasure of Nanda and the other inhabitants of Vrindavana. So I would like to focus on the fact that Sukadeva Goswami is saying that by the association of Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yasoda, all the other inhabitants of Vrindavana developed the culture of Krishna Bhakti, and relate this somewhat to two other points. One that Srila Prabhupada is making about the difference between Nityasiddha and Sadhanasiddha, and also about this concept of devotional service, that the apparent suffering in devotional service is also ecstasy, and that one can understand this if one is a devotee. All right. So this association of devotees, we know, is something that is very important. Satam prasango mamavirya samvida. And here we're reading that even in Vrindavan, even in Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, when Krishna appears, that this association of devotees is crucial, that the association of Nanda and Yasoda, who are eternal devotees of the Lord, they're eternally the Lord's mother and father. They haven't fallen and have to come back to the position like as Tutapa and Prishni. They come, and by their association, they enliven all the other residents of Vrindavan. And this is true at every stage. If we're going to ask, is there one thing I could do that would really make a huge difference in my spiritual life? And I like to tell this story, that there was a factory that had a big boiler. It provided the heat and the energy for the various machines. And it was a fairly new boiler, but it wasn't working properly. And the company kept calling in different people to repair this boiler, and they would work on it and it wouldn't work. They weren't able to fix it. And the company president was exasperated and didn't know what to do. So he asked among his other employees, do you know of anybody who's a good plumber, HVAC person who can fix our boiler? And one of the employees said, yes, I have a good friend who's expert. So they call in this expert, and he goes to the boiler, and he has a little hammer, and he's banging on the boiler in different tap, 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 tap. And after about a half an hour of doing that, then he finds a particular place where the sound was a little different, and he hits it hard with his little hammer. And then he says to the company manager, he says, here's my contact information. If the boiler is still working in 2 weeks, let me know, and then I will send you an invoice. So after 2 weeks, it's still working. So he sends him an invoice for $5,000. And treasurer is financial officer is $5,000. So he discusses it with the company president. The company president says, ask him for an itemized invoice. So the financial officer contacts the plumber and says, can you send us an itemized invoice? The plumber sends back. He says, for hitting the boiler, for tapping the boiler, $5. For knowing where to tap the boiler, $4,995. So knowing where to tap it, what to do. We find in the teachings of the Bhagavatam, the teachings of Rupa Goswami, processes are given for attaining to perfection. Right? There's 4 main processes, right? Karma yoga, detached work, Dhyan yoga or meditation, Gyan yoga, philosophical detachment, and Bhakti yoga. And of course, sometimes these are combined. Like if you read Lord Kapila Dev's instructions on Sankhya yoga, you'll see it includes everything except for karma yoga. It's got meditation, it's got philosophical detachment, and it's got worship of the Lord. And so it's got elements of bhakti, gyan, and dhyan. And we have like karma mishra bhakti, gyan mishra bhakti, yoga mishra bhakti, etc. So there's different processes. And then, of course, Krishna says, yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana shraddhavam bhajate yamam sadhana yuktatamo mataha and bhaktimam abhijananti yavanyas chasmi tomam tatvatom natvam vishate tadanantaram. So Krishna is declaring that of all the 4 processes and any mixtures of them, that bhakti is supreme if we want to fix our boiler, if we want to attain enlightenment, if we want to go from being a conditioned soul to being a sadhana siddha. But then in bhakti, there are so many processes. There's 64 processes, as I said, given by Rupa Goswami. Prahlad Maharaj identifies 9 processes: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Bandhanam, Padasevanam, etc., in his discussion with Hiranyakashipu. So there are those lists, and then there's different discussions in different places in the Shastra of different processes for within bhakti itself. And Rupa Goswami gives, among the 64 angas, he says that 3 are most important, and those 3 have to do with sadhu sangha, and that is taking shelter of a spiritual master, taking diksha from a spiritual master, and following the instructions of a spiritual master. So he says those are the most important among all the 64 angas. So it's possible to attain perfection just by following the Rathayatra cart. It's possible to attain perfection just by drinking a little Charanamrita. Still, he says these are 3 most important, and they're all sadhu sangha. Then he gives 5 most powerful. And these 5 are also, in his list of 64, there's a number of them that are very similar to each other. So among these 5 most potent, they represent various limbs of bhakti that are similar to each other. And this is chanting the holy name, living in a holy place, especially the Mathura area, worshiping the deity, studying the Shastra, especially the Bhagavatam, and associating with devotees. So we have associating with devotees as the 3 most important and as one of the 5 most potent. And then we will find it's included, like if I'm going to holy places, I'm supposed to go to holy places to associate with devotees, as Prabhupada said, not just to take a bath like one of the animals there. If I'm worshiping the deities, I must be instructed in deity worship by a spiritual master. That there implies that there's the association of devotees. Chanting the holy names, especially Sankirtan, of course, is done in the association of devotees, and studying the Shastra, particularly Rupa Goswami is saying studying the Shastra in the association of devotees with like-minded devotees. So we see that this association of devotees permeates the 5 most potent items of devotional service. Of course, one could also say that the most important thing to do is to chant the holy name, and to chant the holy name with attention. However, to chant the holy name and to chant with attention requires the association of devotees. However, to get the association of devotees does not require chanting the holy name. So we could make the argument that the association of devotees is the key. I have found in my own spiritual life that the jet fuel for me to advance spiritually is association of devotees. And we're seeing that this is operating at every level. It's operating when one is an aspiring devotee. It's operating when one is a perfect devotee. It's operating when one is, working in this world, trying to enter into Krishna's pastimes, as in today's verses. It's operating when one enters into Krishna's pastimes in the material world. And it is even operating in the spiritual world among the perfected devotees. And it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada, in his Purport to Nectar of Instruction, Text 4, he says, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness has been established to facilitate the 6 kinds of loving exchanges among devotees. He's saying that's its purpose. And of course, one of the 7 purposes is to bring the members closer to the prime entity Krishna and closer to each other. Prabhupada also says in that same Purport, Nectar of Instruction, Text 4, the life of the Krishna conscious society is nourished by these 6 kinds of loving exchanges among the members. So association of devotees is done in a particular way. It's done in terms of these 6 loving exchanges. So what are the benefits? Why is it that associating with devotees is so powerful? And how do we associate with devotees? So the benefits, and I'm sure you can think of others. These are some I thought of from Srila Prabhupada's instructions, the instructions of our acharyas in the scriptures. But again, I'm sure there are others. So one is we have an example. Without the devotees, it's very hard to understand. Like, let's say that in the Shastra, there were no narratives of people practicing spiritual life. Let's say the Shastra was just some rules and some processes. That was it, and a description of the result. But there was there were no examples. It would be extremely difficult, right? Especially because devotional service is an action, anushilanam. It's something one does. So if we're just learning something theoretical, some theoretical idea, even then it's helpful to have an example. What to speak of if we're trying to learn a skill, if we're trying to learn something that we do. I recently taught ISKCON hermeneutics. We'll be teaching it again in September online. And where I recently taught it was kind of a small private situation to some very senior devotees. And I was asked, well, can't you just give a lecture and, give an hour lecture? I said, well, normally it's a 16-hour course. And, these are senior people and they're very knowledgeable and they're very expert in what they do and they're very busy. And, why does it need to be so long? And I said, well, this is a skill. And for a skill, you have to practice it. So you can't just be taught theory. The theory is fine, but you have to practice it, and you have to practice it with a teacher to give you feedback. If you're going to teach someone how to play a sport, teach someone how to play tennis or swimming or whatever, you need to watch somebody. So my oldest son and his kids they very much like tennis, and they like to observe expert tennis players, how they play, and they can watch, they do it like this, they do it like this, they do it like this. And then they have a trainer, they have a coach. Actually, a couple of my adult grandsons are tennis coaches. And the person comes to you, do it like this, do it like this, do it like this. And then I'm doing it like this. Watch how I'm doing it. Now you do it. And this is how we learn a skill, right? There's kind of a process. Dr. Bruce Wilkinson breaks it down to, I tell you, I explain it to you, then I show you, then I do it with you, then I watch you do it, then I give you feedback, and then you do it on your own. And this feedback from a coach, right? Those who have studied how any of us learn a skill, having an example of a coach and feedback from a coach is absolutely essential. Otherwise, you'll be practicing something wrongly. Deharmita Swami likes to tell the story of how, when he read about that we should eat the remnants of food offered to Krishna before he was with the devotees, he would cook things in a pot, and then he would take all the food out of the pot and take whatever was burnt on the bottom and offer that to Krishna and eat that and throw the rest away. So, one has to get proper instruction. Another benefit is we please Krishna by pleasing his devotees. And this is true everywhere. If you want to make me happy, the best way to make me happy is to make my children or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren happy. Make my friends happy. You'll make me happier a lot faster by making my grandchild happy than you will by trying to make me happy directly. This is just nature. And we're like that because Krishna's like that. Another thing is we please Krishna by our cooperative attitude. Lord Vishnu tells this to the Prachetas, the 10 brothers. He was very pleased with their cooperative attitude. And this point was something that Srila Prabhupada made repeatedly, that we needed to have a society of love and trust. We needed to cooperate with each other. Now, one will argue, well, sure, I'd love to be cooperative, but not with so-and-so. And it's a fact that association with devotees means to associate with people who are like-minded. Like Yamuna and Dinatarni were living in their own ashram, just the two of them. And some devotees were criticizing, you're not getting devotee association. And Prabhupada told them, he wrote to them. So we still have the letter. He said, if you have association of 2 devotees that are compatible, everybody will make advancement. And if you have 200 devotees that are not compatible, no one will make any advancement. So in the spiritual world, there are groups. I mean, here we're talking about Krishna's parents. So I'm sure that there's many devotees who are elders and acting parentally towards Krishna, but there's different groups. I'm sure there are some who are more inclined to Krishna, some who are more inclined to Balaram. There's those who are in the paternal mood, those who are in the maternal mood. And again, I'm sure there's groups. We know among the young lovers of Krishna, there are many different groups, and they don't all agree about how to please Krishna. They have different views as to how to please Krishna. So they have different groups. The cowherd boys also have different groups. Some of the cowherd boys like to argue with Krishna. Some of them are very submissive. Among the servants, there are different groups. Among the cows, there are different groups. I was just at Gitanagari, and they said that they separate cows into different pastures because cows are very social animals. And if they have all the cows with all of the cows, then they're fighting. So they separate them. So there's different groups. So cooperation doesn't mean that I have to live in the same room with everybody. But Srila Prabhupada wants us to cooperate, and he doesn't want us to be criticizing. Somebody may have a different mood. Somebody may have a different vision. Somebody may, they may have a different take. And as long as they're, not violating the principles of Krishna consciousness, we should be cooperative and respectful, not that the way I see it is the only way. Now, we also associate with devotees to practice life in the spiritual world, because in the spiritual world, everything is conscious and everyone cooperates together for Krishna's pleasure. And in the verses we're reading today, this is Krishna's pastimes in the material world. And Srila Prabhupada says in Krishna book, in the story where the cowherd men are seeing Vaikuntha in the water after the lifting of Govardhan Hill Leela, where they're thinking, I wonder what is our destination? And Prabhupada says there that generally one who perfects their sadhana or nearly perfects their sadhana, they enter into Krishna's pastimes in the material world for further training. So that's what's going on in today's verses, that Nanda and Yasoda are training, they're practicing for their life in the spiritual world. Then we also got a lot of inspiration from other devotees. We get inspiration when we see how they just yesterday, I was taking my daughter to the dentist, and she was talking to me about how she has been dealing with a particularly difficult situation, kind of an extraordinarily, I'd say, out of a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most difficult, I'd say it was probably about a number 8. And the example of how she's dealing with it, how she understands it, was so inspiring to me. I thought, wow, she is really living the Krishna conscious philosophy in her understanding. And we get inspired by that. We also get inspired by how other devotees are attached to Krishna. Somebody talks about Krishna with so much love and affection, and we're just like, oh, wow, I want to love Krishna like that. I want to be attached to Krishna like that. And this is true even at the level of very advanced devotees. In fact, at the advanced stages of sadhana in Raganuga sadhana, so Raganuga sadhana is a practice it's still practice devotional service, but it's practiced by one who has understood something, Prabhupada said, something of their eternal relationship with Krishna. And when that happens, the impetus for bhakti changes from primarily philosophy to primarily attachment. Now, there's some attachment from the beginning, of course, and philosophy continues, but it becomes much more, I'm serving Krishna because I want to love Krishna in a particular way, rather than I'm serving Krishna because I am convinced that Krishna consciousness is the right thing to do. And how does the practice itself differ in Raganuga sadhana? So there's 2 ways that it differs. And one is that one especially does the items of bhakti that nourishes their eternal relationship. But the other way that's germane to today's discussion is that one especially meditates on, reads about, talks about the other devotees who are similar to oneself. We're talking about compatibility. And if one is inspired to be in the role of like a mother of Krishna, then one will specifically meditate on Mother Yasoda, Mother Rohini. Prabhupada writes about this in 10.9.3. But this is a general principle of Raganuga sadhana. So in that way, one becomes inspired. And Rupa Goswami, in explaining what inspires us in bhakti, he says, well, there's Krishna himself. That's the technical term, is Vishaya, of the alambana, of the vibhava. And what also inspires us are devotees who have a mood similar to ours. And the technical term for that is the ashraya, of the alambana, of the vibhava. And devotees who don't have a similar mood to us can also inspire us in bhakti as what's called udipana of the vibhava, which means a general stimulus. Like one can be inspired by seeing Krishna's peacock feather, one can be inspired by hearing the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and one can be inspired by the devotees in general. So how do we associate with devotees is explained in the Nectar of Devotion, text 4. We give them prasadam, especially prasadam and that they like, that Krishna would do this, Mahaprabhu would do this, and we accept the prasadam that they have given us with gratitude, with appreciation, with love. We give them gifts that they like, that are useful to them, and we accept their gifts with gratitude, with appreciation, with love. Gifts are not only tangible objects, gifts can be of time, of energy, of care. And we hear them revealing their mind, and if their revelation of their mind is disturbing, we find Krishna in it somehow. Even if they haven't found Krishna in it, we do. And we reveal our mind to them, ensuring that we reveal our mind to others in a way that enlivens them. So this is how we associate with devotees. And then we also become, just like in today's verse, especially in the purport 251, we also become enlivened. And this is true of the practicing devotees, and it's true of the perfect devotees. It's true of the Nityasiddha devotees. They're also, their stimulation, their vibhava in the alambana category, in the ashraya category, is there other advanced devotees like themselves. And then Prabhupada makes the point here that one thing we will understand is that this so-called suffering, what does Prabhupada say? Sometimes we may superficially see that a devotee is in difficulty because of being engaged in devotional service, but the fact is different. When a devotee suffers for Krishna, their suffering is transcendental enjoyment. Unless one becomes a devotee, this cannot be understood. So I saw this with my daughter yesterday. I experienced that she was finding happiness in great difficulty because she was seeing Krishna there. So we can understand this. Prabhupada says one cannot understand this unless one's a devotee, but we have some idea of this even materially, that let's say I love somebody and I am busy doing something for them. Let's say I'm helping to plan some major event, their wedding or their 50th birthday party or something like that. And there may be suffering involved with this. And there may be difficulty. But because I'm doing it with love, I'm relishing that suffering. I mean, as I said, I took my daughter to the dentist yesterday. She had to have 2 wisdom teeth on one side of her mouth removed, and we were having some difficulty getting the medication for her, and it was really a big deal. It required lots and lots of phone calls to the doctor, and there was this problem and that problem, and my daughter couldn't do it, and she couldn't even open her mouth and speak. So I was the one making all the phone calls, and we kept getting disconnected, and we kept getting to the wrong person, and they were giving us the wrong information. And then the pharmacy said they didn't have the medicine. I mean, it was suffering. It was definitely suffering. And, I got in the car to go pick it up. And then as I'm going to pick it up, they call me and they say, we're having a problem. And I have to get out of the car and I have to go back. And, finally I got it late at night. So that was suffering, but because I love my daughter and I care about her, it was also relishable. And my daughter's daughter, my granddaughter, kept saying, Grandma, we're so happy that you're here. We're so happy you're taking care of this. I'm glad that you're willing to deal with this difficulty and make sure that my mother's taken care of. And that was the happiness. In fact, we feel we like to take trouble for those we love. Taking trouble for people we love is a great pleasure. It is. You shop for someone you love, you cook for someone you love, you clean up the kitchen for someone you love. It's a great pleasure. And we learn this in the association of devotees because they love Krishna. And by their association, we learn to love Krishna. And therefore, our so-called austerities, sometimes non-devotees see the life of austere devotees and they're astonished. And you're like, I don't feel that I'm doing any austerities. Because we feel that love for Krishna. So this is our key to our spiritual life. Undoubtedly, our key is the association with devotees and how we associate devotees and how wonderful it is to associate with devotees. So we have some time, not much. We have about 7 minutes. If anybody has questions or comments. Oh goodness, we have 10 things in the chat.
Hare Krishna. We have a question here from Adipur Shiprabhu.
Yes, Adipur Shiprabhu.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes.
For class, very fantastic. You made some really nice points about how association with devotees fits into all the different forms of worship of Krishna, service to Krishna. And how example is higher than precept, and that, just telling the philosophy without telling an example of somebody who's applying that is a little dry and not as powerful and convincing. And then you were saying something, really made some really good points about how we're inspired. One of the principles of association, become inspired by how somebody's doing. I wanted to ask you a question about kind of a hot button word in regard to association with devotees. Prabhupada calls this thing Purva Paksha. You know that? Purva Paksha, the Sanskrit term, means he gives a class and then he tells the complete opposite, right? So association with devotees, being close to devotees, being influenced by devotees. Then the Purva Paksha is, ready for this word? Privacy.
Yeah, yes.
Privacy.
Privacy.
Privacy. As soon as somebody says, I need my private, what are they doing in the dark? Why do we want to hide what we're doing? Or be away, make the door closed, get the walls up, get at a distance, and then what happens, So the opposite of association would be, can you say something about the danger or the how we have to be very careful about privacy, which people regard very important.
Let's talk briefly about the benefit of privacy. I think it depends on a person. So, Indrajumna Swami once wrote in his diary that he sat in a garden alone for 10 minutes and realized it was the first time that he had been alone in 4 years. And I thought, if that happened to me, I'd go crazy. I'd go completely crazy. I actively need alone time to recharge. Actively. I mean, if I don't have some private time, I can't function. And that private time doesn't have to be alone in the dark. When I was traveling constantly, ironically, my private time was in airports when I was surrounded by thousands of people, but nobody knew me and nobody was talking to me. So, that, but we're different. And we also do need time with Krishna, our japa time, especially. I mean, we may chant japa in a room with other devotees, but that's not required. Our japa, very specifically, is our private time with Krishna. And we may have private time with Krishna on the altar when we're taking care of the deities. That may be also a private time that we're being with the Lord. We're taking care of the deities in our own home. We can't take care of the deities without devotee association because we won't know how to. And we can't chant japa without devotee association because we won't know what to chant or how to chant. But actually, when we're doing those things, it's very much a private time with Krishna. And what to speak of dhyana, meditation, which is one of our angas, that is an extremely private internal time, even if apparently we're in the same room with others. It's just us and the Lord. Of course, when we're meditating, we're also meditating on the Lord and his devotees. But trying to just get away from the other devotees, yes, it can be very dangerous. We can say, oh, now I have an excuse to do nonsense that I don't want anyone else to see. Betty's iPhone, it says.
Hare Krishna, Bhakti Devi. Thank you so much for a beautiful class. And I just want to, expand on what Adi was just saying, but and what you were saying is I relish my early morning japa alone in the dark. But you mentioned something that was very interesting about, I guess, one path that combines all the different paths. And maybe you could just clear something up for me, because to me, like Bhakti Yoga, which is devotional service, how does that really, to me, it includes all the other paths. Like, how does it really?
Oh, wow. I'm going to cut you off because we're running out of time. It does and doesn't. So there's meditation in bhakti, but it's not mechanical meditation. It's loving meditation. There's philosophical detachment in bhakti, but it's not just detachment, because it also includes attachment to Krishna, which in just plain Jnana Yoga is not the case. In plain Jnana Yoga, it's just detachment. It includes karma yoga, but it's being done for Bhagavan. It's being done for the personality of Krishna out of love, and not just for impersonal Brahman, and not with the view of my own salvation. It's done to please the Lord out of love. So although jnana, and karma are all included in bhakti, they're included in a different form and a different way than strictly jnana yoga, and karma yoga. That's a very brief, rushed explanation. I want to get to Krishna Daya, and then we're reading the deities. And I'll give information about hermeneutics, an email that can be distributed. Krishna Daya, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the wonderful class. At one point of the class, you are mentioning Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda. So they are in the material world in the process of training in Krishna's activities. Am I wrong if they are Nitya Siddhas? So can you please?
Well, that's what Prabhupada said in today's purport.
Yeah, because in the earlier purport they said that
for text 50.
Yes.
What's your question?
Yeah. In the earlier purport, like the previous day's purport, so they are mentioned as Nitya Siddhas. So
correct.
I was little bit, if they are Nitya Siddhas, so they also undergo the training. So that's the.
No, they're trainers, not in training. Sorry, that was not clear. They come with Krishna and his pastimes to be trainers.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But of course, everybody is always advancing. Krishna consciousness is dynamic. It's not like, okay, I got here and I got it and that's it. It's always going forward. Well, I love this note taker here in the chat. Wow. There we go. All right. I think we have to end because we're reading the deities there. I will send the information about hermeneutics by email, and hopefully that can be distributed. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nanda Maharaj Mother Yasoda ki jai.
Urmila Devi Dasi Prabhu ki jai. Hermeneutics ki jai. All right. So devotees who are keeping their cameras off, what are you doing alone in the dark? Time to be seen by Krishna. Bhakti Center Temple, please show us darshan. Let us be seen by Krishna, if possible.
How much?
You can.
Are we going to open the curtain soon?
Yeah.
Still waiting a little bit.
Okay. I have a question, Urmila Devi Dasi Prabhu. So when we see a devotee going through some difficulties, do we see it as, oh, he doesn't know, but he's enjoying? Or she?
That depends. That depends on to what extent that person is dealing with these external difficulties in devotion.
Can you elaborate a little bit? Because we don't want to get callous, but we also want to keep Krishna in the equation. How to?
I mean, it was interesting when I was saying to my daughter, wow, I'm so sorry. you're going through this difficulty. And she said, I'm very happy in my Krishna consciousness. She was kind of like, why are you feeling sorry for me? I'm taking firmer shelter of Krishna. I'm seeing Krishna's hand in things. And as she was going on and explaining, but sometimes, people are not doing that. And sometimes they're really wrapped up in the externals and feeling that they're a victim and feeling that, and then we give them some comfort and we give them some compassion and we help them. So that depends on the person. And then there's also, of course, a very transcendental apparent suffering, which we really don't have time to talk about today. But if you go to my YouTube channel, if you go to my classes on the Nectar of Devotion, and especially the classes on the Vyavichari Bhavs and the classes on the secondary Sthai Bhavs, there's quite a bit of discussion there about emotions that appear to be negative and appear to be difficult, but are actually forms of ecstasy.
Interesting. Will do. Thank you, Urmila Devi Dasi Prabhu. And thanks to everyone for participating actively in this discussion. That's the real Srimad Bhagavatam. Right.
So the curtain's going to open where it's 8:03.
Yeah, they're opening.
Oh, Jai.
Okay. Hare Krishna, everybody. It was nice spending the time with you.